9. Organizing identity, entrepreneurial governance, and public management. Paul Duguay. These days, it seems increasingly difficult to get away from culture. Within the academy, for example, the theme of culture has come to dominate debates in the social and human sciences. At the same time, the substantive concerns of other spheres of existence have come to be represented in cultural terms. In the domain of formal politics in the UK during the 1980s, the ruling Conservative Party's radical program of reform was represented in large part as a cultural crusade concerned with attitudes, values, and forms of self-understanding embedded in both individual and institutional activities. In other words, the government's political project of reconstruction was defined as one of cultural reconstruction, as an attempt to transform Britain into an enterprise culture. To my mind, one of the most interesting, indeed remarkable instances of the contemporary Toronto culture has occurred with the field of perspective of prescriptive organizational discourse. In recent years, people working in large organizations are very likely to have found themselves exposed to culture change programs as part of attempts to make enterprises more efficient, effective, and profitable. Even in the most ostensibly material of domains, that of business and organization, programs of reform have come to be defined in cultural terms. A cursory inspection of any number of recent management tests reveals the primacy accorded to culture in governing contemporary organizational life. In this literature, culture is accorded a privileged position because it is seen to structure the way people think, feel, and act in organizations. The problem is one of changing norms, attitudes, and values, so that people are enabled to make the right and necessary contribution to the success of the organization for which they work. To this end, managers are encouraged to view the most effective or excellent organizations as those with the appropriate culture, that assemble of norms and techniques of conduct that enables the self-actualizing capacities of individuals to become aligned with the goals and objectives to the organization from which they work. This focus on culture as a means of producing a particular relationship to self amongst members of an enterprise suggests that its deployment as a governmental technique is intimately bound up with questions of identity. As Renato Rosaldo, 1993, has suggested, it is a pronounced feature of the present that questions of culture quite quickly become questions of identity, and developments in the organizational context seems to bear this out. According to the popular management guru Tom Peters, 1992, contemporary attempts to govern the culture of an organization have major implications for the sort of identities that can flourish within an enterprise. He argues that emerging organizational forms will turn every employee into a business person or entrepreneur. That is, contemporary organizational reforms accords ontological priority to a particular category of person, the business person or entrepreneur, providing this menschlichen typus with, in the words of Max Weber, quoted in Hennis, 1988, the optimal chances of becoming the dominant type. In this chapter, I focus upon the new norms and techniques of conduct of culture being instituted within organizations and the priority they accord to the entrepreneur as a category of person. More specifically, I inquire into the political and ethical effects of reimagining public sector bureaucrats as entrepreneurs, paying particular attention as to whether such a move is sufficiently pluralist, presupposing as it does a single ethical hierarchy, with the entrepreneur as at its apex, exploring the ethos of enterprise. In January 1994, the Public Accounts Committee (PAC) of the House of Commons in the UK issued an unprecedented report entitled "The Proper Conduct of Public Business." The report was published in the wake of a number of well-publicized failures in administrative and financial systems and controls within government departments and other public bodies, which had led to money being wasted or otherwise improperly spent. 1994. According to the committee, these failings represented a significant departure from the standards of public conduct expected in liberal democratic societies in general and in the UK in particular. Along with many sections of the British press, Financial Times, 1928, January 17, Guardian, 92, January 1st, etc., the Public Accounts Committee indicated that these failings had occurred at the same time as the introduction of more market-oriented and entrepreneurial systems of organization within the public sector. They also agreed that the two developments were related in some way. However, unlike some sections of the press, the Public Accounts Committee allotted to credence to the possibility that the cultural revolution taking place within the public sector actively encouraged conduct amongst public servants that might be interpreted as improper. Indeed, those who acquired the political ethical property of the current reforms received short shrifts. They were castigated for not wanting to accept the challenge of security beneficial change. 1994. This language of change invariably the sort that challenges is a constitutive element of contemporary managerial discourse. Managerial discourse. It forms part of a discursive chain of equivalences that includes inter alia, enterprise, empowerment, and customer. This discourse is, of course, relational in character. Its constitutive elements only get to mean what they do in relation to that which they are not. For example, the norms and values of conduct inscribed within contemporary managerial discourse are articulated in explicit position to those constituting the identity of bureaucratic organization, whereas the bureaucratic ethos encourages the development of particular capacities and predispositions amongst its subjects, strict adherence to produce, the abnegation of personal moral enthusiasm, and so forth. Contemporary managerial discourse stresses the importance of individuals acquiring and exhibiting more proactive and entrepreneurial traits and virtues. that the Public Accounts Committee report speaks from within the universe of contemporary managerialism can be in little doubt. In the report, the managerial ethos, with its greater delegation of responsibilities, streamlining, and more entrepreneurial approach, is favorably compared to the traditional bureaucratic ethos of office, the latter being uniformly associated with waste, inertia, and unnecessary regulation. 1994. As I have indicated, however, while expressing a belief in the public benefits of contemporary organizational change, the report bemoans the diminution of principles and standards of conduct expected of public officials in liberal democracies. 1994. That these principles and standards have arisen and have been fostered largely within a bureaucratic context does not seem to be relevant. Instead, the committee appears to assume that organizational reforms designed to make public organizations less bureaucratic and more entrepreneurial are uniformly positive, that they will increase economic efficiency, providing improved services and reduced costs, without affecting traditional public sector values. This can easily be interpreted as something of a leap of faith. However, if not out of non sequitur. For one thing, assuming that the identity of a domain remains the same throughout all the changes it undergoes is extremely problematic, as I have already argued, given that any identity is basically relational in terms of its conditions of experience, of existence. Any change in the latter is bound to affect the former. If, for example, the bureaucratic conduct of public administration is reimagined in terms of entrepreneurial principles, then rather than having the same identity, bureaucratic public administration, in a new situation, a new identity is established. Moreover, the production of this new identity will inevitably involve trades-off, rather than assuming, as the PAC report seems to do, that entrepreneurial public management is incontrovertibly a good thing, that it is inherently positive. It might be more productive to examine its conditions of emergence, to analyze that its establishment must inevitably exclude, and to assess that the politico-ethical effects of this exclusion might be. Entrepreneurial governance and the critique of bureaucratic culture. The case against bureaucracy and for the sort of flexible entrepreneurial forms and practices envisioned in contemporary discourses of organizational reforms being with chances in what it is termed the external environment. The conditions of existence of this discursive information rests upon a number of developments. Often gathered together under the heading of globalization. While different texts highlight differing combinations of phenomena, the dislocatory effects consequent upon the increasing deployment of information technology, those associated with the competitive pressures resulting from global systems of trade, finance and production, etc. They all agree that the intensification of patterns of global interconnectedness has serious repercussions for the product of organizational life in both the public and private sectors. If globalization constitutes the key predicament, then bureaucracy is positioned as the crucial impediment to the successful management of its effects. Globalization it is argued creates an environment characterized by massive uncertainty. In such an environment, only those organizations that can have rapidly change their conduct and learn to become ever more enterprising will survive and prosper. Because bureaucracy is held to be a mechanistic form of organization best suited to conditions of relative stability and predictability, it becomes the first casualty of such an uncertain environment. In this environment, bureaucratic institutions, public and private, increasingly fail us. Today's environment demands institutions that are extremely flexible and adaptable. It demands institutions that deliver high-quality goods and services, squeezing ever more bang out of every buck. It demands institutions that are responsive to their customers, offering choices of non-standardized services that lead by persuasion and incentives rather than commands, that give their employees a sense of meaning and control, even ownership. It demands institutions that empower citizens rather than simply serving them. Osborne and Gibler, 1992. The dislocatory effects generated by the intensification of patterns of global interconnectedness require constant creativity and the continuous construction of collective operational spaces that rest less upon mechanistic objective forms and their related practices. Bureaucracy, and increasingly upon the development of more entrepreneurial organizational forms and modes of conduct. The notion of enterprise occupies an absolutely crucial position in contemporary discourses of organizational reform. It provides a critique of bureaucratic culture and offers itself as a solution to the problems posed by globalization through delineating the principles of a new method of governing organizational and personal conduct. Quite obviously, one key feature of enterprise as a principle of government is the central role it allocates to the commercial enterprise as the preferred model for any form of institutional organization of goods and services. However, of equal importance is the way in which the term refers to the habits of action that display or express enterprising qualities on the part of those concerned, whether they be individuals or collectivities. Here, enterprise refers to a plethora of characteristics such as initiative, risk-taking, self-reliance, and the ability to accept responsibility for oneself and one's actions. Kidd, 1990. Thus, as Burchell, 1993, has noted, the defining characteristic of entrepreneurial governance is the generalization of an enterprise form to all forms of conduct. To the conduct of organizations hitherto seem as being non-economic, to the conduct of government, and to the conduct of individuals themselves. While the concrete ways in which this governmental rationality has been operationalized have varied quite considerably. The forms of action they make possible for different institutions and persons, schools, general practitioners, housing states, prisons, and so forth, do share a general consistency and style.